But thankfully, the Market House and St Margaret's Church, which for so long had been landmarks in the High Street, were retained. The Hayes Fete is held each summer, but this film, taken in 1956, shows the fete starting off in far from seasonal weather. The parade, which was led by the Dagenham Girl Pipers, contained many local company floats. The Fairey Aviation display featured the Fairey FD2, which had gained the world airspeed record of 1,132 miles per hour earlier in 1956. Fairey Aviation had a long association with the area, as the company used the nearby Heathrow airfield until it was developed as London's airport, and they also had a factory at Hayes. The parade was led by the town crier and the carnival queen, suitably protected against the rain in the famous 1950s Pacamac and plastic sheets, of course. It seems that the rain continued all that day in 1956, but some hardy souls braved the weather and tried to enjoy themselves on the rides and sideshows. The 1960 Hayes Fete seemed to enjoy better weather as the parade assembled in Nestle Avenue, ready to make its way through the town. The route would take the carnival through the town centre, along Station Road, and then into Cold Harbour Lane. The displays in 1960 included one for Dr. Triplett's School, which was celebrating its centenary that year. As the parade reaches the Uxbridge Road, we can see some of the many local groups taking part, including amateur dramatic clubs and sports clubs. Also represented are major factories such as Sunblest Bakeries. made by the Hayes and Harlington Urban District Council in the early 60s shows the contrasting landscapes in the area. These range from rural scenes to the more industrial areas shown here bordering the main Paddington to the West railway line. The railway formed a major feature of the Hayes map in those days before the M4 motorway snaked across the district. In even earlier times, the Grand Union Canal was the major feature of the area. But long before this film was shot, it had fallen into disuse, and many areas around the canal were left derelict. Before the building of motorways, there were two major east-west roads crossing the Hayes area. Firstly, there was the Uxbridge Road, which up to 1960 still had the trolley bus service operating its 66-minute journey from Uxbridge to Shepherd's Bush. The second major road was the A4 Bath Road, which passed the new Heathrow Airport. London's new airport was opened in May 1946, and by the mid-1950s, air travel had grown so much that the Queen's Building was needed. In the late 50s, we can see here mainly Viscounts and DC-3s viewed from the top of the Queen's Building. This new building offered better passenger facilities and a roof terrace where visitors could watch the airliners. Plans to extend the airport to the north of the Bath Road had been scrapped in 1952 after a great deal of public objection. However, the introduction of larger jet airliners in the 1960s increased both the passenger throughput and the employment opportunities for the area, but brought with it increased noise levels for many local inhabitants. On the 3rd of October 1932, the borough of Heston and Isleworth received its royal charter. The day's celebrations started with the presentation of the charter by the Duke of Gloucester outside the Firestone factory on the Great West Road. This building was demolished suddenly in 1980, but for many years was an important landmark in the Hounslow area.
I was particularly glad to accept your invitation to present this charter, as I feel that I have a personal link with the district, having served with my regiment at Hounslow, which has been the scene of military activities since the Middle Ages. I now transmit to you this Charter of Incorporation from His Majesty the King, with the sincerest wishes for the future prosperity and happiness of the new borough of Heston and Isleworth.
As Charter Mayor of the new borough of Heston and Isleworth, I accept this charter of incorporation and would express our deep gratitude to His Majesty that in the exercise of his royal prerogative, he has deemed our district worthy of higher status. Presenting you this 17th century sword, which was manufactured in Hounslow as a memento of this eventful day in our history.
This film, taken in 1938, shows the Heston and Isleworth Fire Brigade on training exercises. The film was made to show the many aspects of firefighting which were undertaken by the borough's fire brigade. World events of the late 30s, including the Munich crisis and the Spanish Civil War, meant that Britain had become aware that a war with Germany was very likely. It was also clear that a future war would also involve the civilian population. As well as their routine training, the firemen shown here are practicing how to deal with damage caused by bombing. A major concern in those last few months before war broke out was that poison gases would be used against civilians. Therefore, the fire brigade had to be ready to deal with gas attacks on Hounslow. But thankfully, this never happened. In the event of war, they may also be called upon to deal with crashed aircraft. Here, the firemen can be seen handling foam apparatus and rescuing the dummy pilot from a staged crash in the fire station yard. All too soon, the firemen had to deal with real bombing when the Blitz started in 1940. Through that summer, London and the southeast of England suffered heavy bombing by day and night. By the 15th of September 1940, massed daylight raids on London had been abandoned by the Luftwaffe due to their high losses. However, nighttime bombing increased, and on the 5th of October, houses in Villiers Road, Isleworth, suffered direct hits, and the emergency crews were needed to clear the debris. A month later, on the night of the 13th of November 1940, more bombs fell on Hounslow as the high street suffered from incendiary and high explosive hits. Shops that were set alight included Woolworths, which, like all its branches in those days, was known as the Threepenny and Sixpenny Store. Also hit were Giltro's, the baker's, and Curry's, the electrical shop. The fire crews from all the surrounding stations were kept busy throughout the night as fires raged through the high street. The following morning, some normality returned as the shops that had not received direct hits tried to carry on regardless of the damage. Temporary counters were quickly set up so that customers could be served. The firemen were still needed during the day to damp down the fires and to ensure that bombed-out buildings were safe enough for the people of Hounslow to return to the High Street.